If you're a woman over 60 and you're seeing a younger man, listen closely. Because what feels like passion can quickly become self-erasure. And if you're not careful, you'll trade your self-respect for fleeting affection. This isn't about judgment, it's about truth. Too many older women bend, shrink, and overgive just to keep a younger man interested. That's not love. That's sacrifice without return. Hi, I'm Vernon, and today we're talking about the one mistake no older woman should make with a younger man. Not because you're weak, but because you've lived long enough to know your worth. Never do this with a younger man if you're an older woman. Not to please, not to prove, never again to disappear. If you've ever chosen attention over self-respect, even once, don't hesitate to subscribe to my channel, because one moment of truth can change what you allow from this day forward. Now, let's step into the first truth, one that far too many learn only after the damage is done. 1. Never mother a man who wants a lover. It starts with small things, explaining what he should already know, calming him when he lashes out, guiding him through his messes with the patience of someone who's cleaned up far too many. And before you know it, you've traded your romantic role for a maternal one. Not out of weakness, but out of instinct. Women like you, who've carried families, buried losses, held others together, you know how to show up. You know how to heal. But healing is not the same as loving, and being needed is not the same as being cherished. You weren't meant to be a stepping stone in someone else's journey to emotional adulthood. You weren't made to pour wisdom into a vessel that only takes, never gives. The danger here is subtle, and that's what makes it so devastating, because it feels like love. The intimacy, the closeness, the trust. But underneath, it's something else, a quiet erasure of your own needs. And no one notices, not even you, until one day you look in the mirror and realize you're tired, not from age, but from constantly holding the emotional weight of two people. A relationship should feel like rest, not another job. A younger man may be drawn to your strength, your calm, your grounded nature. But if he begins to rely on it more than respect it, then slowly your relationship becomes lopsided. One person is growing, the other is dimming. And you didn't survive all these years, all these lessons, just to raise another man with your time, your heart, your energy. You came here to be met, fully, equally, soul to soul. The poet David Whyte once said, "The price of our vitality is the sum of all our fears." And for many, the deepest fear isn't being alone, it's not being chosen. But here's the quiet truth. Being chosen isn't worth it if you have to disappear to stay loved. Depletion isn't romantic. It's how we lose ourselves, in inches, over years. And no matter how thrilling the passion, how intoxicating the connection, it is never worth the slow death of your peace. Not now, not ever. And yet, that's only the beginning. Because once you give more than you receive, the next sacrifice comes even easier. 2. Never trade your voice for his comfort. I've seen this one up close, in my own marriage. My wife, bless her, is the strongest woman I've ever known. And when we were younger, and I was more foolish, there were times when I spoke too loudly, too quickly, with all the arrogance of a man still learning who he was. And do you know what she did? She went quiet. Not because she agreed, not because she was unsure, but because she loved me and thought silence would keep the peace. But peace without truth is just tension in a prettier dress. Years later, when we sat in our kitchen with all the miles and grief and gray hair between us, she told me the truth, that every time she swallowed her voice, she felt herself growing smaller. And I had no idea, because I was young, and I mistook her grace for agreement. This is what I want you to hear. When you start biting your tongue to protect his ego, you start losing your place in your own life. A real relationship, the kind that endures not just time, but truth, doesn't crumble when discomfort enters the room. It deepens. It doesn't just withstand discomfort, it grows because of it. Like a tree rooted in shifting soil, bending with the seasons, but never breaking. Because the presence of honesty, even when it stings, is what turns love from illusion into something living. Without it, what you have isn't intimacy. It's choreography. A careful dance around what's real, all for the sake of keeping the peace. But love isn't meant to be rehearsed. It's meant to be raw, uneven at times, messy. And in that mess, that brave, beautiful mess, is where trust is built. If a man cannot hold space for your truth, your full, inconvenient, beautiful truth, then he is not ready for your love. You already know this. I'm just helping you name it. Because the moment you begin editing yourself for his comfort, you are no longer in love. You are managing him. And that's not your job. Not now, not ever. And when your truth no longer has room to live, the relationship starts to feel like a home you no longer belong in. Which brings me to the next thing we need to talk about. And before we go on, if this has stirred something in you, save this video. Not for me, for you. Because some truths don't land all at once. Sometimes they need to be revisited, like old letters we only understand after life has weathered us a little more. 3. Never shrink to fit into a life that was never built to hold you. There's a kind of slow erosion that happens when you keep making yourself smaller so someone else can feel big. At first, it feels like compromise. Then, it becomes your default. You adjust your rhythm to match his pace. You quiet your joy to soften his insecurity. You downplay your wisdom to avoid intimidating him. And before you know it, you're folding in on yourself, like a house with too many rooms closed off, just to make a guest comfortable. But you were never meant to live in a corner of your own life. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But in the name of love, so many women give up that privilege, not in one grand gesture, but in 1,000 tiny silences. We abandon our fullness not because we don't know it exists, but because we fear what it might cost to keep it. To be fully yourself, radiant, experienced, unapologetic, is to risk not fitting in to someone else's smaller idea of who you should be. And for many, that fear of outgrowing love becomes stronger than the longing to stand tall within it. But here's the truth. Any love that asks you to dim your light was never love at all. It was comfort in disguise. And comfort without growth is a quiet kind of prison. So when Jung speaks of becoming who you truly are, he's not offering a poetic notion. He's giving you a spiritual imperative. You owe it to the years behind you and to the woman who still lives inside you, not to vanish in the name of belonging. You don't need to be less to be loved. You need to be seen, all of you, and still held. Real love doesn't flinch at your depth. It welcomes it. It says, "Come as you are, and stay that way." So ask yourself, does this relationship expand you, or does it require a smaller version of you just to survive? Because if you keep shrinking to be loved, one day you'll forget the sound of your own voice echoing in a room where you take up all your space. And that silence, that loss of self, is too high a price to pay for temporary warmth. But love, real love, doesn't ask you to disappear. It asks you to show up. So let's open the next door together and look at another way women lose themselves in trying to hold on to something that was never holding them back.
4. Never confuse intensity with intimacy. Intensity is what pulls you in. The spark, the chemistry, the nights that stretch into mornings. It's fast, consuming, and loud. But intimacy? Intimacy is quiet, slow, built, not burned. The danger comes when we mistake one for the other, when the fireworks blind us to the emptiness that follows. A man may say all the right words, touch you in all the right ways, look at you like you're the last miracle left on earth. But if you can't speak your fears to him, if you feel lonelier in his arms than you do alone, that's not intimacy, that's noise. We live in a world that romanticizes the spark, but ignores the slow burn of emotional safety. And yet it's safety that builds trust, not the high of adrenaline, but the softness of being understood. Seneca once wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." And in love, craving more intensity while starving for connection is the loneliest kind of poverty. So ask yourself, does this relationship make you feel known or just wanted? Because being desired is flattering, but being understood is sacred. And maybe that's the quiet tragedy of many relationships. We settle for being admired from afar, instead of being accepted up close. One makes us feel special, the other makes us feel safe. Intensity is fire, brilliant, but unpredictable. It dances, it dazzles, it devours. Intimacy is like water, still, patient, essential. It doesn't clamor for attention, but it sustains everything it touches. One leaves you breathless, the other helps you breathe. This is why we must be careful, especially as women who've already weathered decades of becoming, not to confuse the thrill of being seen with the depth of being known. Because when the high fades, and it always does, you're left with what's real. And real love is what remains when all the performing stops. As the philosopher Alain de Botton reminds us, true love is not the desire to possess, but the desire to see another person fully and to be seen in return. So, if the relationship doesn't give you space to exhale, to unravel, to speak without editing, then it isn't love. It's performance. It's pressure. It eventually becomes pain. And you, my dear, have earned more than that. So let's not stop here, because the most dangerous compromises are often dressed up as devotion. And what we explore next might just be the most deceptive of them all.
5. Never mistake sacrifice for love. It sounds noble, doesn't it? Giving, staying, enduring. But not all sacrifice is sacred. There's a kind of giving that nourishes both people, that flows from abundance, not obligation. And then there's the kind that slowly hollows you out. Many women, especially those in midlife, have been conditioned to believe that the more they suffer in silence, the deeper their love must be. But suffering in love isn't a virtue. It's often a symptom of imbalance. According to a 2021 study published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships, individuals who consistently suppress their own needs in a relationship experience higher levels of resentment, anxiety, and emotional fatigue. Over time, this leads not to closeness, but to emotional detachment. Here's the trap. When you've been taught to equate sacrifice with love, it becomes difficult to recognize exploitation. You start calling exhaustion loyalty. You label your own neglect as patience, and you confuse pain with proof. But love, in its truest form, doesn't demand your undoing. It doesn't flourish in silence or self-erasure. It grows in reciprocity. So the next time you feel yourself giving more than you have, pause. Ask not just what you're giving, but why. Is it to be chosen, or is it to be respected? Is it out of love, or out of fear? Because love that costs you yourself is the most expensive kind. And no one, no matter how charming, how magnetic, how different they seem, is worth the price of your wholeness. This is the quiet grief many women carry, not the loss of the man, but the loss of themselves inside a love that demanded too much and gave too little. True love doesn't ask for proof through pain. It reveals itself through presence, through the day-to-day tenderness of someone who sees your worth without you having to earn it. And perhaps the deeper question isn't, am I giving too much? But why have I made myself responsible for holding it all together? Sometimes the desire to be chosen is so deeply rooted in us, we forget to choose ourselves first. So I ask you, gently but truthfully, have you ever mistaken your exhaustion for devotion? Have you ever stayed, not because you were fulfilled, but because you were afraid to start over? If you feel called to share, leave a comment below, because your voice, your story, might just be the reminder another woman needs tonight.
And now, let's step into the final part, one that often hides behind good intentions, but slowly chips away at your sense of self.
6. Never abandon your boundaries in the name of being easy to love. It starts subtly. You let the little things slide, not out of grace, but out of fear that speaking up might make you too much. You begin to adapt, to bend, to silence the parts of you that seem inconvenient. And soon, you're not showing up as yourself anymore. You're showing up as the version you think they can handle. But here's the quiet heartbreak. The more you erase your boundaries, the more you teach someone to overlook your needs. Boundaries are not walls. They're the outlines of your emotional home. They tell the world how to love you without burning the house down. Yet so many women, especially in later life, confuse being agreeable with being lovable. They give until they're depleted. They say yes when their soul is screaming no. Why? Because somewhere along the way we were taught that ease makes us more desirable, that low maintenance equals high value. But let me say this as clearly as I can. The right person will not be afraid of your clarity. They will not shrink from your truth. They will not punish your standards. The philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And if your thoughts are constantly telling you to be smaller, to be safer, then the relationship is not love, it's survival. So ask yourself, have I been walking on eggshells to keep someone else comfortable? Have I been confusing silence with strength? Have I been abandoning myself in small, daily ways? You deserve to be loved in a way that doesn't ask you to disappear, not even a little. Every story we walked through wasn't about blame. It was about remembrance. Because too often we forget ourselves while trying to be loved. We silence our truth to soothe his ego. We confuse being needed with being valued. We shrink our light so he doesn't feel small standing beside it. And over time, those small decisions become a life we don't recognize, one where our reflection has dimmed and our voice has grown quiet. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once said, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are." And that's what we're really grieving, isn't it? Not just a man, not just a relationship, but the versions of ourselves we left behind to be easier to hold. This video wasn't a warning, it was a mirror, a gentle invitation to return to the woman you were before you started apologizing for taking up space. Because real love, the kind that honors you, doesn't demand your silence. It doesn't shrink you. It doesn't ask you to be convenient. It says, "Come exactly as you are, and stay that way." So, if this message stirred something in you, honor that. If it reminded you of a moment where you forgot your worth, don't hesitate to subscribe to my channel.
because somewhere out there, another woman is walking the same road, quietly questioning if she's too much or not enough, or simply tired. Let this be her reminder, too. You are not hard to love. You are just ready to be loved rightly.